Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Thank you for joining us on this rainy Tuesday here. Let's get started with some space weather news first. Our solar wind speeds coming in at 341.9 kilometers per second with a density of 5.4. We are looking at several sunspots right now. AR2886, AR2887, 88, and 89. 89 is the newest of the bunch, and yesterday we mentioned the possibility of a solar flare, a 10% chance of a solar flare from AR2887, and that did indeed happen. In fact, we saw a M.13 class solar flare from this particular sunspot. Now, it is not clear yet what kind of an impact that we will have from this particular CME that has been ejected towards Earth facing. Only because if you look here in the picture that I'm trying to show at the bottom where the southern region is, that's where the CME came from one of those bright active regions. Very weak, and it is very far south of an Earth facing direct hit. So this could glance our magnetosphere or brush off and possibly have minimal impacts off of this, but nothing too crazy, nothing too serious. It could jolt some seismic activity. That is not out of the question as well. But right now, AR2887 is the region with the most sunspots at this time. Now we are at a sunspot number of 81. That's the smooth sunspot number of 81. But AR2887 is the biggest, and it is putting out the most action right now as we speak. So we'll continue to watch that as we look at this situation. Right now, nothing to worry about. M-class is moderate solar flare, but nothing crazy, especially when we're talking about something that is going to be below the trajectory of Earth. So it's going to be south of us, going to affect our southern part of our magnetosphere, and should not be a crazy event for us. But it could jolt some possible seismic activity, moderate earthquakes, 6.0, 6.3, something in that realm. Who knows? It could spark another volcano to just kind of bust open a little bit. Our cosmic radiation dosage rate today has fallen from yesterday. We were at 9.1%. Now we're looking at 8.8%, which is still high. Lots of cosmic radiation still in our atmosphere for this point of the solar cycle, and a lot to talk about today too on the solar cycle situation. We are looking at a KP of 1 with a 24-hour max of a 2, and the TCI dropped slightly as solar wind speeds continue to stay level in the 300s. We are at a 6.80. Before we get into today's articles, I would like to start the show off with an update on the Terminator event, and that is important. Oh, but before we do that, let's check out another sunspot that should be emerging on the northeastern limb. There it is right there. I spoke of this yesterday. I talked about how this was action on the far northeastern limb. I saw it explode a couple times during the broadcast yesterday. And this thing has now had over 6 explosions from this sunspot, and we are not yet Earth facing. So it is now peering over the northeastern limb. This could be the 5th active region to produce sunspots, and we could be pressing close to 100 on the smooth sunspot number, as this is a pretty active and large region at the time. So we'll continue to watch this. The sun's getting a little active, and it's like we've seen this over and over and over again, where we get this burst of activity from our sun for a while, and then things kind of die down a little bit, and then we see things pick up again. Right now we're starting to see things pick up again. Also, want to now, while I have everyone's attention, the website at wtfsky.org, please give us a little time with that. Mari is putting it down for a little bit. We are putting some maintenance out on the website. It is not yet fully functional, and I didn't want to forget about that yet because that was important yesterday. I got a little premature excited and showed everyone what we're doing, but it wasn't quite ready for a launch yet, and I think I might have broke it. So Mari is, as always, cleaning up the mess. But back to our sunspots here. We're starting to see more activity, starting to see more action. So the big thing is the Terminator event, right? What's going on? Well, let's check it out here as I was at SPACEWEATHERlive.com. Great website, by the way, folks. Very useful here as far as resources. I love SPACEWEATHER.com. It's been a favorite of mine. Dr. Tony Phillips has ran it with class and integrity. And these folks over here at SPACEWEATHERlive.com also are enthusiasts about space weather. So over here in the far right corner where it says forum messages, it says important Terminator update. And I thought this was important, so I want to start off the show with this. On October 22nd, 2021, an update was published in Solar Physics after 3 fails, 2019, 20, and 21, for the date of the Terminator Solar Cycle 24. The big boys from NASA still think it's imminent this year. However, we used the start of Solar Cycle 25 to find it. Our guess is the latest possible date was at the end of October 21st. There's a paper here linking this theory and everything. This isn't the case, and we now know why. You can find it on the article, which is, I'll go to that here just in a second, but I want to read on. We exclude the value of cycle 14 because it was a weak cycle. In the meantime, we found a new theory to calculate the exact strength of the upcoming cycle with an accuracy better than 5.9%. I know you're thinking, gee, Jake, that's very low, but when it comes to solar physics, you'll take what you can get. We calculated that solar cycle 25 will be comparable to solar cycle 14. Interesting, right? If you look at our paper, then you can find by yourself the Terminator event will happen around August of 2022, 10 months from October of 2021. This doesn't exclude big solar events in the meantime, as we have already seen on the far side of our sun. Now, the reason why we're seeing such large events on the far side of the sun has to do with the orbit right now and where all the planets are aligned, and they're on one side of the sun. So there's a side of the sun that doesn't have a strong magnetic field because all the magnetic connection is on the other side of the sun at this time. So therefore, we're going to see a weaker magnetic connection on the far side of the sun, which allows more solar activity, more sunspots to explode, CMEs, such and so forth. But this is interesting. This website, too, I want to mention, SpaceWeatherLive.com does not have an agenda. In fact, if anything, they fight the theory that we're in a grand solar minimum. I've seen people on this website deny the fact that we are heading into a grand solar minimum. And that's okay because everyone has their opinion and everyone has their own research. So I understand that. However, this page, as neutral as it is, they're comparing this solar cycle to solar cycle 14. And I'll get to more of that here in a minute. But here's the article, the Springer Leak. Response to limitations of the Hilbert transform approach to locating solar cycles, Terminator's event. And if you read here, this will tell you exactly what they're looking for and what and how. I'll read a little bit of this for you guys. Booth, Solar Physics 296, is essentially a critique of the Hilbert transform techniques used in our paper, and it listed here, to predict the termination of solar cycles. Here we respond to his arguments. Our methodology and parameter choices do extract a mathematically robust signature of terminators from the historical sunspot record. We agreed that the attempt in the L20 to extrapolate beyond the sunspot record gives a failed prediction for the next Terminator event of May 2020. And we identify both a possible cause and remedy here. However, we disagree that the B21 assessment that the likely termination of solar cycle 24 is 2 years after the date predicted in the L20, and we show why. And going into this here, it says Booth, here after B21, is essentially a critique of Hilbert transform techniques used in our paper. We already read that. As it's where was the important part that I wanted to show you guys? Let's move down here into the article. Here is the graphs that we have for this. And there is where you have your Terminator events right here. This is the last one. Solar cycle 23 ended in 2011. There's your Terminator event there. And this is where we are currently. So we are very, very close to the next Terminator event, right? That's a long solar cycle. This one is going to be a shortened solar cycle if indeed it happens in August of 2022. Now, we've talked about what happens after the Terminator event. Well, usually after the Terminator event, the sun will jumpstart into a lot of action, a lot of activity. That's only true the further it gets away from the 10-year period. Now, the 10-year period was April of 2020 from the last Terminator event. So the further away we go from April of 2020, or 2021, I should say, the weaker or stronger the cycle will be. So the further away it'll be weaker, the closer to April of 2021, the stronger it'll be. However, that is not going to be the case at this time either. If they're predicting this event to happen in August of 2022, I want to show you that they are comparing solar cycle 14 to solar cycle 25. A lot of folks out there seem to think that this Terminator event will jump us out of a grand solar minimum, possibly putting all kinds of theories that the GSM is going to be skipped this time around and whatnot and so forth. So let's take a look at solar cycle 14 so we get a good clear indication of where we are. Check it out here. Here's our sunspot graph here for solar cycle 14. Looks pretty low, right? It is. Check out the smooth sunspot numbers of where we are during the maximum. This was 1906 through approximately 1908, where we saw smooth sunspot numbers in the values around the hundreds. Now, if they are predicting solar cycle 25 to look like this, folks, I don't think that we're going to see that big number that they were expecting. Some folks were saying we're going to have a smooth sunspot number of 160, which would be way up here. But these people are predicting, based on their paper and their calculations, that solar cycle 25 is going to look a lot like this, which is interesting, right? Because we have seen lots of activity so far that doesn't add up to what we've seen when we're talking about solar minimums and whatnot. Again, it all can be confusing. Let's try to compare where we are on the graph. I'll take a look really fast here at solar cycles 14, which is right here. There's your red dot. That's your smooth spot sunspot number right there. And as you can see, it is just over that 100 mark. Now, I don't know if solar cycle 25 is going to end up in the same spot. And this graph does not yet show, obviously we haven't had solar cycle 25, but this is the beginning of 25. And it could be up here in this area, an equal strength or slightly weaker cycle than what we saw in 24. That would still indicate, in my books anyway, and a lot of other people, we can tell where we have been declining in solar activity for several decades heading into this grand solar minimum. So if anything, this new Terminator event paper is giving us more clarity on when we can expect this Terminator event. That'll make it almost a year and a half away from where they first predicted it. And they've been predicting this Terminator event 2019, 2020, and 2021. Now, some independent researchers out there will disagree with this and say that the Terminator event has already happened. But according to this paper and the information that we have here, which is based on their findings and their research, it has not yet happened, and we're expecting it sometime in August of 2022. Now, they've been wrong 3 times. They could be wrong a 4th, right? It's possible. And the longer that we get from, the further away from April of 2021 we get for this Terminator event, the weaker this cycle is going to be. And they're already predicting this to be about the same strength as solar cycle 14, which is right here. I'll show you guys one more time. So let's take a look at solar cycle. Well, they don't have 20 on here, but one more time, looking at 24 or 14, I should say. So again, this website does not have an agenda. It is non-biased. In fact, it almost rejects sometimes the idea of a grand solar minimum in a cooling phase. They are reporting the science as needed. And I thought it was important today that I share this update because a lot of people are wondering about this Terminator event. When's it going to happen? What's solar cycle 25? Everyone's hinging everything on this solar cycle 25 and how strong it's going to be, how weak it's going to be. And a lot of people are hanging their hats on, is this going to be the grand solar minimum? And I want to tell everybody that we are in the very beginning cycle of 25, okay? We are also at the very beginning of this grand solar minimum, which will only continue to see lower solar activity. Again, folks, a grand solar minimum is a period of low solar activity, usually between 30 and 50 years of lower than average solar activity. That really started in solar cycle 24. As you guys can see clearly right here, we have very weak solar activity compared to 23, 22, and 21. We see very average, if not above average strength solar cycles. But we've still seen the activity from our sun decline over the past several decades. But this is where things begin the grand solar minimum, when you start to see below average solar activity. We're actually predicting solar cycle 25 to be as weak as solar cycle 14, which is right here. Notice where that red line is. It's actually lower than what we were in 24. I don't think they're saying it's going to be an exact clone. I think what they're saying is we're going to see things right around in this area again. So that would be 2 consecutive solar cycles with lower than average solar output. Very interesting post I saw on Twitter yesterday. I also shared it as well. A good friend of ours, David Mortimer, shared the forecast for the next 20 years on sunspots, and it looks very, very bleak in the 2030s and 2040s. Now, a lot of you can say, well, that's just numbers they came up with. Those are generic numbers in 2040. I would agree with you on that, but they're actually still putting some effort behind these values throughout the 30s and 40s. So lots to still wait for it. Only time will tell, and I know it's so cliche to say, but so many folks out there thinking that this Terminator event is going to determine whether or not we're heading into a grand solar minimum. And then I find this article from people who are just very, very neutral about when this Terminator event is going to be. And I know these folks don't work for NASA, but their paper shows the evidence. And this is why it's so important that we look at all the information, whether it goes along with our agenda or whether it goes against our agenda. We have to look at the information, because that's not being prepared if we're only one side as far as the information we look at. We have to be open to see both sides of it. And right now, the side that usually says we're not heading into a GSM is showing us information that indicates that this cycle, and they say it here in their article, this cycle will be comparable to solar cycle 14. Maybe about 10 or 15 more smooth sunspots more, maybe 20. However you cut it, it will still be below average when it comes to solar activity. So once again, the Terminator event for the sun is not expected until August of 2022. Now, again, to line up with that date of the end of October of this year, a lot of folks are saying, well, look at the sun right now. Yes and no. Smooth sunspot number of 81 with 4 different active regions. That's not very high for this time of the solar cycle. If we were closer to 100, I would probably be convinced that maybe we have had this Terminator event and things would kick wide open. But right now, we're not seeing that, because I want to show you, too, on the far side of the sun. Again, if we were in a Terminator event, not just this region right here would be lit up, but we would see multiple sunspot regions start to fire up on the far side of the sun. And that's just not happening at this time. This area right here we're watching could be 2890, I should say. That could be 2890. But before that, we don't know if there's another sunspot emerging or not. So this is not consistent to me as a kickoff event for the Terminator event and solar cycle 25. So still waiting for this Terminator event, folks. All right, let's get into a couple of articles real quick. Giant lava fountains, very violent activity after partial cone collapse at the Cumbre Vieja La Palma volcano. This happened yesterday, October 25th at 8:25 UTC, followed by a very violent explosion that started around 1330 and the opening of a new vent, an oppressive lava flow around 1400 UTC. The events were preceded by a significant increase in intermediate and deep seismic activity on October 24th, with an increase in magnitudes in the intermediate zone. I've seen several reports saying that the major event is winding down and then something like this happens. We've had 274 earthquakes in the last 24 hours in this region as well. 110 of them had a magnitude equal or greater than a 3 or 4. So we are still seeing some significant, every time we have these clusters of 3s and 4s, we tend to see more lava explosions and more possible new vent opening up like we have here. But as you can see on this chart, it is showing us that we are starting to see seismicity activity starting to decline a whole lot here compared to where we are. So La Palma is winding down, yes, but she's not going out without a fight, as we still see impressive lava flows from this volcano. No danger of any tsunami. Don't have to worry about anything crazy like that. We are still watching, but the chance of that happening is probably less than 1%. Let's move over to our green policy situation here. Germany energy prices going through the roof. Supply tightens as leaders botch energy policy. Now, I've talked about Germany several times in our broadcast about what is happening to the prices. But it says here, prices for natural gas, coal, oil, and electricity have been rising massively since the middle of the year. The price for kilowatt per hour of electricity has almost tripled, 13 euro cents per kilowatts per hour. This is high, not just in Germany, but it's also happening here in the U.S. too. Coal and natural gas are at all-time highs. And factor in the barrel of oil costing around $80 a barrel. I know we're paying about $3.52 for a gallon of gasoline up here in upstate New York. Politics in Germany are not entirely uninvolved with the development of prices. The reasons are coal power phase out between 2017 and 2021 throughout Europe, and especially in Germany. Tripling of CO2 certificate prices since 2020 from 20 to over 60 euros per ton of CO2. This also affects gas-fired power generation. The switch from coal power to more expensive gas-fired power. Global increase in demand for gas as a result of the post-pandemic economic recovery. Extremely weak German wind from January to September of 2021. Although Russia has delivered exactly the volume of gas as ordered by gas importers, obviously not enough gas has been ordered. And we can see here where the price is just shooting way up, folks, from last year, from January all the way to now. So electricity prices are also shooting up. We're talking about anywhere from 31 to around 40 euro cent kilowatts per hour. And guess what? There won't be electricity to power electric cars. Another serious problem will soon be a shortage of secure power generation because of Germany's nuclear and coal phase out, which has already begun. Not only is this driving up prices, there will be risk of power supply outages during the winter with possible targeted or involuntary shutdowns to keep from the grid collapsing. By 2030, there will be neither power for a single additional electric car nor additional CO2-free power for industry. Never mind the heat supply. What does this all mean? That means if the United States follows through with their climate action on the infrastructure bill that Joe Biden wants to pass, in a couple of years, we're going to end up like Germany, and prices are already high. So if we've already seen a 10 to 25% increase on energy prices so far, imagine what will be a couple of years into a coal phase out, a nuclear phase out, a natural gas phase out, an oil phase out, and we're just relying on solar energy and wind. And by the way, the wind in Germany was poor, and they are already talking about scheduling blackouts to help preserve the grid throughout this winter. And we already know we're expecting a much colder winter across not just here in the United States, but also across Europe as well. So again, I'm only showing this article. Hopefully a political leader, someone who works in government, sees what's happening overseas right now. They've been doing this green policy stuff for a few years now, and Germany is heading into the poorhouse because of this. Folks can't afford their bills. It's higher than ever, and it's forcing people to move back home with their parents, maybe even being roommates or extended families living in together, like fathers and mothers and sons and daughters, and maybe grandma and grandpa living in a bigger house, splitting the bills because the cost of living is just too much to bear. That's what I fear is going to happen in the United States if these policies are passed and put forth as law, folks. And things are already high when it comes to prices of inflation right now. We're already spending too much for gasoline. We're already spending too much for food. We're already spending too much on basic supplies and goods. With the barge situations off the coast not being unloaded, now we have to worry about energy prices that are shooting through the roof ahead of what could be a brutal cold winter for much of the northern hemisphere. Checking out some weather now. Severe weather outbreak leaves a trail of damage across 3 states. Severe weather broke out across the central United States on Sunday, and apparent tornadoes caused destruction and knocked out power, but spared lives, and according to the reports, no injuries. That is amazing. At least 13 preliminary tornado reports were filed, meaning there is a possibility that October could become a record-breaking month for tornadoes in the United States. Now, that may be the case, but what AccuWeather is failing to mention is that we are still well below the tornado average that we usually have for the country, okay? We're below somewhere around 600 tornadoes than where we usually are by this time of the month. So even though we're seeing impressive activity here in October, still a very low output this year from tornadoes. And I also wanted to mention they had to put in the heat records that were set on Monday, October. Never mind the what's coming. We want to rub it in and show you the heat records here. San Angelo at 95 degrees, their old record stood for almost 60, 70 years now. 91 was the old record. These records are smashed here. Brownsville, 93. That's a 1 degree difference from 1921. 92, 92, and 92 with record stating of 91. So nothing too impressive except for the San Angelo, but Albion, Lufkin, and Longview breaking their records by 1 degree. Now, the warmer weather combined with the cold front made conditions conducive for severe weather and tornadoes. So far this month, 118 preliminary reports have been made by the National Weather Service. The record of tornadoes in October is 123, which was set in 2018. So, with less than a week left, just about less than a week left, we have the chance to at least see 5 more tornadoes because we do have more severe weather possible across the country. And this nor'easter is no joke, folks. It's an earlier nor'easter. We talked about it yesterday. Well, here's some of the rain totals in New Jersey right now. Hazlitt with 4.53 inches. Matawan is at 4.45 inches. Holmdel is at 4.22. Pompton at 4.21. And Waldwick at 4.13. Now, this nor'easter is bringing mainly rain and coastal flooding right now. This is a look at what we can expect for rain today and going into the night. Heavy rain for Boston, Connecticut, Providence, Rhode Island, parts of New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania. Also, if you live in Albany and southward, like Poughkeepsie, New York City, Long Island, you will also see heavy rain today. This is tonight. This nor'easter is driving winds in from the southeast, I should say, and will continue to pummel Boston. And you guys are going to get the worst of this. Portland, Maine also, you'll see your heavy rain tonight. But still moderate rain for most of the state of New York. Things finally starting to wind down tonight for you if you live in New Jersey. But this is the expectations of this rainfall. 10 inches of rain is the storm max from all of this, which that's going to happen in New York, Boston, parts of Connecticut, Rhode Island as well. But 4 to 8 inches seems to be the widespread consensus here for most of this region off the shore. And then you get where Albany is 4 to 8 inches, which is still quite impressive, folks. We've seen quite a bit of rain so far here in 2021 on the East Coast. And here's a look at what the wind gusts we could expect from Tuesday into Wednesday. A storm max of 90 miles per hour. You guessed it, Boston, you're going to get the worst of this. Looking at anywhere from 60 to 80 mile per hour winds in Boston area. And the rest of the coast, like New Jersey and Connecticut, most of Massachusetts, southern parts of New Hampshire and Vermont will see wind gusts in the 40 to 60 mile an hour range. If you live in upstate and Albany and northward and westward, we don't have to worry about all the wind, but we still will have driving rain at times. Urban flash flooding and damaging wind gusts, coastal flooding and erosion, offshore waves of 20 to 30 feet, and of course, power outages. The impacts, again, Boston, you are the bullseye. New York City, Long Island, you guys are starting to see a lot of this as well. So this is the third major system that we've seen in New York, and I know they're already starting it. People out there saying it's climate change, and that's why New York's going to be underwater and all this. But folks, what they're forgetting here is that we have these 1 in 500 year storms. We have these 1 in 100 year storms. We get this period of time where climate is extremely challenging because of where we are in our solar cycle. And we are just right there right now. So don't believe the hype of the New York City going to be underwater by 2100, folks. It is averaged out that the rise of sea level per year is 1/8 an inch. So in the next 79 years, I don't think that's going to be enough to put New York City underwater, if indeed we continue to rise at that rate at 1/8 per inch per year. Again, quickly taking a look at Halloween just because we can. Rain expected for the Northeast for all you trick-or-treaters out there. If you like snow for your Halloween, well, you better move to Wyoming and Montana because that's what you're going to get. Very, very nice night for trick-or-treating for folks out in Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma, and parts of Kansas. But the middle part of the country is going to be chilly and unfortunately very wet in the Northeast on Halloween. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at our GFS outlook real fast and see if we can find anything different from yesterday. I'll be honest with you folks, it hasn't changed much. This nor'easter is going to continue to drive away from the coast. By Wednesday, it's out of here, but another storm system making its way to the northeast once again. That's our Halloween storm. Here's Saturday. So if you live in the Ohio Valley and you got trick-or-treat going on, light rain, good stuff for you. West Virginia, light rain. Across parts of Tennessee and southern parts as well, light rain. But in the northeast, unfortunately, it just looks like it's going to be raining until about time for trick-or-treat. And then heavier for Boston. You folks definitely will have water on your trick-or-treat costumes for sure. But if you live in the New York area, it's safe to bet, make sure you have a poncho at some point because right now the GFS is telling us rain. And then here comes that cold front we talked about yesterday. More rain coming across the northeast by Wednesday, November 3rd. And look at that. That's right. Snow mixing in for us. Mari and I will maybe be able to report some flakes. Very heavy snow overnight. Wet snowflakes. I don't expect it to stick maybe to some of the grassy surfaces, but nothing major here. Maybe a trace to a half inch of snow. And then that cold front just still hanging out right above the 48 here. Nothing crazy, but the Northeast does start seeing colder weather. The Great Lakes and the Northwest also start seeing more colder weather as well as we get into mid-November. A quick ridge and fridge for the Northeast, East Coast before another cold front pushes across the Great Lakes, the Northeast, and across the Northern Plains and Northwest. Ironically, those are the areas that I'm predicting for the most brutal conditions for this upcoming winter. So, thank you for joining us this morning for our Grand Solar Minimum update. Want to also announce one more time that the website, WTFsky.org, is still mostly under construction. We will get you that website once things are up and running once again. I want to say hello to some of our folks out here in the chat. A lot of new faces out here, some old. Matthew McDonald, hello, good to see you out here. Garden Hicks, I think that's how you pronounce it. You said you're from Germany. I feel for you on the prices out there of energy to keep things going. J-Dog, good to see you. Diane, hello, good evening. And Stars and Rocket, good to see you out there as well. Rory, hello, welcome to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. And of course, as always, hello to my lovely wife, Mari, who is busting her butt, folks, over the new platforms that we will be launching, hopefully by November 1st, to help stave off Google and YouTube censorship of real climate science, folks. Take a quick peek at El Nino before we go. Well, it's a La Nina, and it's continuing to drop at negative 0.941. So we are definitely well within the parameters of a La Nina. That's going to do it for me today, folks. Tune in tomorrow for our next Grand Solar Minimum update. Until then, be safe out there, and we will talk soon.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.